To this week's Line of Duty review. So this is episode 5 of series 6. So we're getting down to the crunch now, folks, because there's just 2 more episodes of the series to go after this, and it's really shaping up to be a cracking end of the series. And this is another very good episode. What I'll do is I'll start off with some of the big stuff from earlier in the episode with Kate and Joe and what have you, and then I'll work my way to some of the other stuff on AC12's point of view. This crosses over with that anyway. But yeah, there's full spoilers, by the way. There's only one place to start, and that is with the big reveal from last week. The big cliffhanger was, of course, whose DNA was in the flat along with Joe's, in Vida's flat. Who was the blood relation? Well, full spoilers, I can reveal that if you had Mr. Tommy Hunter in the bingo game, then you were spot on. Tommy Hunter was the blood relative of Joe's, the scary Scottish psychopath from back in series 1, and so we're continuing with the series 1 theme, although it's been jumping all over the series, that continues in this episode, by the way. But yeah, Tommy Hunter's DNA was found there. He is a blood relative, assumably Joe's father, and we also find out that Joe's mother died some time ago. So I think it's fair to say that's the picture that Joe was looking at, her and her mother. Still mourning that, but I think it's a clever way to maybe direct your attention to that, whereas obviously it turned out to be her father that we should be focusing on, and Tommy Hunter. So there you have it. So that's the reveal from last week. I know a lot of people predicted that one, so hats off to you guys. Hastings says he will place Joe under surveillance to keep tabs on her. That's worth noting for later in the episode. But what happens next is that Kate comes up with this idea to try and prove one way or the other whether Joe is indeed bent. We actually don't know exactly what Kate's plan is till the end of it, or then that was her kind of intention. She reveals it later. So she goes to Joe and says she's got a tip off on the workshop, the location of the workshop where the guns were developed in the shooting of Gail Vela. So Joe assembles the team, and the drama of this is just brilliant when it comes to Ryan, because he's obviously there in person, and there's one point where Kate's basically like, I need all officers to hand me over their their phones. And they all sort of groan, and she said, sorry, but we can't take any risks of leaks getting out. And obviously in reality that's intended for Ryan, so we cut to Ryan's face looking sort of put out. And so that obviously adds to the drama. And so they go to this location, and they get there, and it obviously looks like Joe is sort of playing along and backing Kate. They get there, and basically the place has been cleared out. And in the next sort of scene, you see Ryan go into his boot. He has another cell phone, which he didn't hand in, and he's basically texting someone, tipping them off by the looks of it. But to add further to Kate's plan, AC12 are there on the scene. This is a really smart bit of writing, and something you can believe they would do is that they've got a person or a team at every one of the 3 locations, because that's one of the twists, is that when the warehouse is revealed to be emptied, you see Ryan maybe have a sigh of relief almost, but then Kate says, no, there's 2 more sites. I had a list of 3. And there's this other officer, Chris, I think his name, who's really pissed off that he wasn't told. But so they go off to these other 2 locations, and things come to a head with Steve and another officer at one of the other locations. I think it might be the second one. They see, suspicious men going into it, and that they go in and try to make an arrest, and it ends in a shootout, and those two men are shot. The next bit is that Jo and her team arrive on the scene, which makes me think it was probably location 2, because they've obviously just come from the first one. And they arrive on the scene, and Joe's like, "What the hell are AC-12 doing here?" And Steve says, "Bring up on what happened with Jimmy from the previous week. They've got their own investigation." And Joe basically is like, "You've got no authority. You've just stood your men down. Now, can you please stand down with Hastings that it was actually her plan to prove one way or the other if Jo was bent." And Kate, again, maybe sort of influenced partly by her, sort of bond with Jo, is like, "I think this proves one way or the other than she's not bent. I don't think she is bent because she could have, tipped them off, she didn't." So she seems satisfied, but both Hastings and Steve are still suspect. And later in the episode, things come to a head with Kate and Jo when Jo finds out from Kate that she gave AC-12 the tip-off on the whole project on the warehouses. And it's interesting, actually, then Kate would be upfront with that. You're not quite sure if it's part of a plan of hers, but on the surface, it seems like she just has respect for Jo, and obviously Jo confronts her with it and wanted to like tell the truth, which Jo seems to respect. I think despite the fact that Jo's shady and the stuff that's going on, she has been, partly stronghold into this, strong-armed, and I think she actually does care about Kate in her own way, and there's a respect between the two of them. But I think it also speaks to Kate's character that she comes out with the truth in that scene. So Jo uses that against her by recommending that she be posted back out. Says, "I'm sure you'll get a job back with your old pals at AC-12. And Kate rejects that. She says, "I decline that. I'm not going anywhere," which is a really ballsy move from her. It's another good sort of character beat for Kate. Now, I'm not sure in reality how much choice she would have in the matter. I'm pretty sure Jo, leading the department, would have the final say, but I guess for the time being, Kate's obviously willing to dig her heels in and make it tough for Jo to get rid of her. So things escalate, and we get another one of these scenes where Jo is talking to her contact on her mystery contact on the computer, and basically from there, and the contact has lost patience and wants her to do something about Kate, and in so many words says, "Get rid of her." And Jo's nervous to do this. Her reply is, "I will do this as long as it's my last job." And the contact replies, "Definitely." Now, I've been online since the episode aired, and smart Alex have been pointing out that definitely, the word definitely, is an anagram for line of duty. I'm not going any further with that. You can make of it what you will, whether it's actually saying something about what might happen in the drama, or if it's just being clever because of the link to the title of the show. Who knows? But some people, it could be a complete coincidence. Who knows? Knowing the sort of people they are, they probably intend to wipe Jo out as well as soon as she's done the deed with Kate. So anyway, it leads to this dramatic high-action end to the episode. Who wants to meet Kate, and the idea is that she's setting her up to be like killed. But she actually tries to save her, being in a particular area, and like rings her and says, now's not good, sort of thing, but I can text you another time for a different location. But Ryan's there in the car with her and has a gun and says, that's good, basically. So sort of forces her to change the location to this private place where obviously Kate would be more vulnerable, because originally it was Joe's idea to meet in a public place, but under pressure from Ryan, she changes that and texts Kate the location of this warehouse. But Kate, being the smart officer she is, smells something a bit suspicious. I mean, to be fair, who wouldn't? It is a bit bizarre, really, to change the location last minute, and especially to what appears to be this random deserted warehouse. So she then contacts Steve. The episode is that Kate shows up to meet Joe, and Joe's very upset. She's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Kate. I'm sorry." And obviously Ryan's there. He's got a gun, and Kate's like, "Put the gun down," screaming, "Put the gun down." And she tries to use the logic then AC-12 know about you at the warehouse, and that you tipped off your pals, and that has gotten out since, and probably there's hires up that know about it as well. But Ryan doesn't back down, neither does Kate. She like grabs a gun, and Joe's screaming in the background, and the episode ends dramatically with both Ryan and Kate shooting their guns, fade to black, basically. So another really intense scene to end an episode. Also, Ryan shoots at Joe at one point, but I'm assuming he misses because you just see Joe sort of crying in the background at one point. So I think it's fair to say she really does care about Kate and just got in too deep in this thing. The other big meaty plot of the episode is that as they continue to try and find out what exactly the case was which Jimmy was involved with, do some digging, and they find a link to this case from the past, this illegally charged case where a black man was murdered, Timothy, and basically where the police had evidence that it was a race-motivated crime, and they sort of did nothing. They had a group of suspects, let them go, even though they could have obviously moved forward and tried to prosecute them. And obviously this also goes into some nasty, like, reality-based ideas of the way certain police officers do behave, that some are indeed racist. So it gets brought out then when Timothy is laying there dying, a group of police officers are basically laughing at him and making monkey charts. And this, obviously, Chloe, who's investigating this, obviously gets very emotional and very upset, being obviously a person of colour herself, and you can understand it. And also she's new to AC-12 at this point. She's less experienced, so she gets emotionally involved and upset at that. But what happens is they make a connection to this character who was involved in the police force at the time of the investigation. That being Marcus Furwell, played by James Nesbitt. We see him in a photograph, basically a group of photographs. So he has a murky past, and he, as it turns out, was involved on an investigation many years ago that AC-12 did. It's at like a children's home, which was in a previous season, where the character of Fairbanks, forget his first name, but Fairbanks was involved in like a cover-up of the abuse that took part there. And Furwell was also on the team involved at that point, and suspiciously he went off on holiday around the time AC-12 were prosecuting, and when they came in and they took Fairbanks, basically arrested him. And there's sort of this amusing story of, not story, sorry, photograph of Nesbitt on holiday, sort of sunning it up, which I just tickled me for something. But Nesbitt's a great actor, so hopefully we'll get an appearance from him some point this series. Um, but anyway, this leads to Chloe and Steve going to question Fairbanks, who now is quite elderly and his health isn't holding up so well. And so it's this sort of scene of them trying to get information out of him about this potential case, because they believe this might have been the case, the reason Gail Vera was murdered, because she was on to this case involving the police force. And Fairbanks sort of pleads ignorance, like he doesn't really recognise the name Gail Vera. He sort of claims that he doesn't really have memories of Churwell, and it's just this thing where I think you suspect that he's maybe putting on an act, but at the same time, because of his mental state and that, it is possible that he has actually forgotten. But anyway, Steve is the one who actually gets emotional in this scene. Like he gets front, you know, starts shouting at Fairbanks, yeah, the abuse of those boys, which you let happen time and time again. Actually, it made me wonder later if Steve maybe has some sort of a background like that. The fact that he just lost his sort of rag in this scene, not that you can't understand it, but maybe that if he'd had some personal experience, which hasn't been hinted at to this point in the series, but it made me wonder if maybe there is something in his past like that. So he just get him, and in the end, like, it's this awkward scene where Fairbanks starts wetting his pants basically, and Steve has to back off, and they have to back off. They don't get anything out of Fairbanks. But things gather pace and really take an interesting turn later on, because Chloe finds out that Gail Vera was trying to interview a number of potential figures who were supposedly involved in corruption around the time. And again, you've got the photographs up on the wall, and all people who have AC-12 have investigated and know have been involved in corruption, but she couldn't get an interview with any of them. There was only one person she could get an interview with, and that was Lee Banks. Lee Banks, who is the brother of Carl Banks, who is the main suspect in the killing of Gail Vera. And Chloe go to interview him in prison, Lee Banks that is, and Lee basically stands up for his brother. He says there's no way, because Steve's theory is that Carl was basically a rat, was threatening to expose the corruption, and that's why he became like this scapegoat. He was like fitted up, and that's why he was murdered. And Lee basically says there's no way he would be a rat, and if you're looking for a rat, you should look within your own department, and that being with Hastings. Because there's been this thing earlier on in the episode where Steve, the search of Steph's house in the previous episode, he found these banknotes, and the banknotes can be traced to the ones in the previous series, which supposedly Hastings was offered basically as part of a bribe. And in this scene, Lee says that Hastings apparently was a rat. There's the incident with John. So this gives Steve a whole new light on why Hastings would give Steph the money as like a payoff. Now, I think what's interesting about that is that Hastings, there was suspicion cast on him last series, but at the time I sort of called it that it was going to turn out to be false, because it seemed too early in the series, and it seemed to be that it would be too obvious at that stage if like Hastings was H, as they were like setting us up to maybe believe. This time it's different. This is like later in the series we're sort of getting to the final, and obviously not saying he's H, but then there's obviously something dodgy going on with him, and that adds to that basically. And another thing just to think about before I forget, before I skip past this side of the plot, is that our friend Mr. Buckles, currently in prison, was one of the officers on the team, Burwell's team. So just think about that. And one more thing to talk about is that we get a cameo from the brilliant Anna Maxwell Martin, who I absolutely love. She's been in Motherland, this brilliant BBC sitcom, bunch of other things. She's always very, very watchable. She, of course, was in the last series as well. And she's the one who is set to take over from Ted in a month's time. And she plays this part so well. She comes in, pays Ted and AC-12 a visit, and basically accuses them of having a wafer thin case on Buckles, putting him away purely based on the whole thing with the files. Because his lawyer is now lodging an appeal, and that she demands that Buckles is released. She also has got wind of the surveillance AC-12 had put out on Joe, also on Ryan. Plays the politics games because she sort of frames it as, I'm going to be in that job in a month's time, and we're spending too much on surveillance. So she demands that the surveillance is taken away from Ryan and from Joe, to take over this investigation for the remainder of it. And it's this really dramatic sort of turn of events that really puts Ted and the whole department on notice. And obviously, from our point of view, it seems that this is convenient timing, because it's at a point where they're getting closer to cracking this case and finding out who the dodgy cops are and getting to the heart of the matter. Potentially steamrolls the whole thing, and definitely takes some actions which would seem to benefit the corrupt powers that be. Let's just say that. And so she's obviously now going to factor in for the rest of the series, I would say. And it's like Kate contacts Steve, and again, she's like really going to extremes, because she insists on taking everyone's phone. So she comes in when Steve gets the call from Kate and says, I'll be needing your phone. But it turns out that I think there must have been another phone or something, because later on Steve does get that text from Kate telling him the location of where she was set to meet Joe. And Hastings kind of steps in, because and Hastings like, out there and potentially in danger, we're going to go and we're going to investigate and try to save us. So you sort of see them going off, along with the with Carmichael in the background following them. Another good cameo appearance, this time from Anna Maxwell Martin. Another cracking episode, and things again ramping up nicely towards the end of this series. So let me know your theories and your thoughts in the comments below. Anything I've covered, anything you think I left out which should have been covered, because there's always a lot in these episodes. And also, what do you think of Jo as a character? Do you think she does have sympathies for Kate? Do you think she legitimately cares about Kate? Certainly some of her actions in this episode, I think, seems to indicate that she was trying things to try and save Kate. Any theories? Will we find out the other H, the one that hasn't been revealed yet? Will that be something we find out before the end of the series? If so, who do you think it was? But thanks for listening. Obviously, I do other reviews, other TV reviews, so a couple more things you can look out for on the channel. I've been reviewing the X-Files from the beginning, the original series, so that will run and run and run. I'm currently nearly at the end of season 1, so if you're an X-Files fan, then do check out those reviews. I'm planning on doing a couple of X-Files this week, actually. A bit of a catch-up. The new show I've been doing, which is very exciting, is this show, Them, which is on Amazon Prime, so I'm about halfway through the first series of that, so check out that for another current TV show. And something starting this week, in fact, airs tomorrow on Sky Atlantic, the first episode of this new series, Mayor of Easttown, starring Kate Winslet. So I'll be reviewing the first episode of that, which should be up over the next couple of days. So plenty more to look forward to this week. So like and subscribe, let me know your thoughts. As I said, you can also contact me on Twitter at Keith Beard, and if you ding the bell on YouTube, it will let you know when I go live or when I post a new video. But thanks guys, see you soon. Goodbye.